So, thinking about how to study, given what the blueprint notes for those weightings, first, we recommend you have a good handle on financial reporting. Once you've gone through and you feel that you have sufficient knowledge and comfort level with financial reporting topics, then you should move on to audit and assurance because that's the next heaviest weighting, followed by tax, and then finance has the lowest weighting. Also, within those competency areas, you should be looking at the competency map. So that's going to detail what is an A level, what is a B level, and what is a C level competency. So putting those two pieces together should help to inform your focus for studying. I also wanted to note too, we have here at the bottom the comments for PEP on candidate performance on the September 2025 Core 1, and that's a file on D2L. So when you log into D2L, it's on the landing page there. So for the most recent exam, what they noted in terms of technical is, and I'm just going to read what the file says. Candidates appeared to struggle with technical knowledge related to events after the reporting period, changes in accounting policies, estimates and errors, the objectives of financial reporting, and contributions and restrictions. So, why I'm noting this is if the examiners have noted that those were deficiencies on the last exam, you should self-assess. How do you feel about those competency areas? Of course, Rob and I have zero idea what could possibly be tested on your exam, but it's really always helpful to understand where previous candidates were successful or, in this case, unsuccessful. Okay, so how do you study? How do you practice for the multiple choice questions? A few tips. The first one is a excellent resource is in Unit 8. There is the retired exam set. So in the other units, you have the retired exam cases, but in Unit 8, it's the set, which is the case plus 75 multiple choice questions. I know that nobody's idea of a good time is sitting down and spending 4 hours writing an exam, but this is the best way to really understand what it's going to be like to write a 4 hour exam. You should also try to have the same process that you will use on the exam. So, by that, I mean phones away, no distractions, literally locking yourself away. And if you like, you can have some distractions, such as, I don't know, have someone come in and eat noisily next to you if you think that that will help you if you're easily distracted. But the point being that you should really sit down and try to set yourself up so you're replicating the process that you will have on the exam. You may want to print the MCQs because that is how you will be given the questions on the exam, printed version as well as in Surpass, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Another consideration is to review your performance on the weekly unit quizzes. So you can go into the grade book and you can see how did you score on the weekly quizzes. And if there was a week or weeks where your performance was low, you can redo the practice version of those quizzes. Or maybe you know which week without even looking at the grade book where you did poorly, but going back and doing those is a good idea. And finally, don't forget about the learning ebook. In UWorld, which is the platform that the ebook is delivered on, you can set up an adaptive review. And so you can utilize this to focus on those particular competency areas that you might struggle in. For example, non-monetary transactions. I'm not a fan of those. That is something I know that I could go into that chapter and I could test myself on those quiz items. The other thing I wanted to say is we often hear from candidates that they don't constrain their time when you're doing the weekly quizzes. So, understandably, you're worried about the grades and you may not be constraining your time. But something that you might want to do is to redo some of those unit quizzes and constrain your time to get comfortable with doing the questions more quickly. Another tip is exam software. So, looking at Surpass, which is the software system that you will be using, when Rob is speaking and towards the end of the session, I will send through the chat a resource file that has the link to this. Or you can just be like me and Google it, Surpass, and it will take you there. But it's very helpful to look at all of the rules, the regulations. There's also a practice exam on there. So you can actually go in and test the functionality. It's recommended that you do this before you get to the exam because it can help to alleviate some anxiety with never having seen this system before, and you can actually test it out. I'll note that when you do the test, it doesn't have actual questions that you would see on the exam. They're easy questions like what color is the sky? But the point is that you get to just test out the system. But some things that you might want to consider if you are a person that will take longer on the case, meaning you have difficulty constraining your time to the 60 minutes, and I know many candidates are having difficulty doing that, then you may want to effectively force yourself into writing the case in 60 minutes by doing the multiple choice first. So spending 3 hours to do the multiple choice and leaving the case later. Other candidates say, I want to use the best portion of my brain to do the case because I can guess if needed on the multiple choice questions, and I can't do that on the case. So, why we're discussing this is for you to start thinking about this, thinking about your preferred strategy, and also to think about your strengths and weaknesses. So, what do you think is going to be most effective for you? And you might want to crowdsource this. So ask coworkers or peers, what are some ideas? What do you think is best? And if you're still on the fence, you're not sure, you can always try your preferred strategy when you write that retired exam set. So if you think that it's best to start with the case, then start with the case when you do that Unit 8 retired exam set and see how it goes. And you can always change your strategy if it doesn't work. So CPA Canada recommends 3 hours for the objective format portion. That works out to 2.4 minutes per question. 75 MCQs over 3 hours. I have checked my math. It is right. So instead of sitting there and calculating 2.4 minutes precisely for each question, it might be easier to gauge your time in batches of 25 questions. So, meaning by the time that 1 hour is up, you should be done 25 questions. That will keep you on track for hitting 3 hours for the 75 MCQs. If the 1 hour mark you are behind, you need to hustle. Most candidates probably won't be ahead, but hey, maybe so. And I just also wanted to reflect back on that file that I had discussed previously, the comments for PEP candidate performance on the September exam. And what they said in there is that they noted candidates performed poorly on the MCQ portion. And what the examiners noted is that candidates spent more time on the case at the expense of the MCQs. So again, understanding where previous candidates were unsuccessful will help you to avoid those same mistakes.
Nikki, we have a request if you could provide the link to that exam comments, maybe in your file that you're going to provide.
Yep, absolutely. You bet.
Thank you.
It's just right on the D2L landing page, but I'll screenshot it and put it in the Word file, then you'll know exactly where to go. Um, So some more exam strategies, and then don't worry, I'll take a break soon. We'll debrief questions. I'll ask Rob. It won't be all of me talking for this. But yeah, we'll chat about your other questions for sure. Each question is worth 1 mark. So with the MCQs, it comes down to thinking about how to maximize those marks and preserve some of your mental energy. So, some suggestions are answering the easier questions first. It also helps to boost your confidence, preserve some of that mental energy. And another idea is to set a time limit so that, for example, you're not spending more than, say, 3 minutes on a more complicated question, because if each question is worth 1 mark, you don't want to spend too much time on any one question. And as I mentioned, you can flag questions. So you can always come back to those questions later. That's what I would do for some of the more complicated ones, or perhaps some harder calculation questions. I might flag that until the end. Speaking of calculation questions, you do need to consider a strategy. You will be provided with a calculator, and the details on the calculator that's provided, you can self-research that using the links that I will send through with the exam regulations. So you're given a calculator. You also have a spreadsheet in Surpass. So you can decide what are you going to use. You do have the printed version of the MCQ questions, but you need to answer it within Surpass. So again, just that idea of thinking about these and developing a strategy, because you can't have the spreadsheet and the MCQ open at the same time within Surpass. But again, you do also have the printed version of the MCQs. Okay, writing strategies, kind of a debrief here. Read the question carefully, especially when you are going fast on an exam. You can miss some of those keywords that really change the structure of the question. So look for things like not, always, etc., because that can be a game changer for the response. In Surpass, you can use a highlighter for the question, not for the potential responses, but for the actual question. So again, play around using that practice version of the exam. And for financial reporting, which we know 50 to 70% of the questions, make sure that you are reading the accounting framework being used. They have to give you the accounting framework. Make sure that you are reading that carefully. It might be helpful too, if you read the question, think of what your expected response is before you read the options. I know when I just read the options before thinking of the expected response, I can get myself very turned around once I read those options. And something that may be helpful to you, it's just an option, is to eliminate incorrect answers. So those obvious incorrect ones, you can use strike through in Surpass. Don't have to use it, it's just an option, but make sure that you do select the right response and it's highlighted before moving on. Again, all those details are in the practice exam, which is why we recommend that you use it.